Hi, everyone. Let's talk about decisions, how to decide to reject the null or not, and writing down final conclusions relative to the claim or in terms of the claim so that a layperson can read it. Someone who hasn't taken statistics. Shame on them. Okay, in a hypothesis test, we decide to do one of the following. Literally, we decide. We decide to do one of the following based on our sample results. We're either going to reject the null, in which case we accept the alternative. If we reject the idea that the coin is fair, we then accept the idea that the coin is biased or unfair. Or we do not reject the null. But remember, we never accept the null. We can accept the alternative, but we never accept the null. It's right here. We sometimes accept the alternative, but we never accept the null. The null never gets love. Because remember, let's say that the coin comes up heads 50 times in 100 flips. Even then, you would not accept a null hypothesis that says that the coin is fair because there's still vulnerability to sampling error. It's still quite possible that the coin was actually a 0.51, like a 51% heads coin, and the 50 heads may have been due to sampling error. So even if you get 50 heads in 100 flips, you never affirmatively accept that the coin is fair, that the null is true. You never say innocent at the end of a jury trial. You might presume innocence, and we should, right? We assume the null is true as we make calculations, but we never say in the end innocent or the null is true at the end because there's still vulnerability to sampling error. If we don't reject the null, it basically means that we can chalk things up to sampling error. Okay, based on our decision, we write a conclusion relative to the claim or in terms of the claim. The conclusion may be written in two parts, and this procedure, I guess, is written and summarized in these tables. Now, some books have a fancy flow chart, but it's actually much simpler than that. This might seem kind of silly to you, but it's this basically mix match thing where, okay, if you reject the null, you start the sentence one way. If you don't reject the null, you start the sentence another way. If the claim was the null hypothesis, you end the sentence one way. If the alternative was the claim, you end the sentence another way. Again, it seems kind of hokey. It seems silly, but it works, folks. It works. All right. So let's say you reject the null. You get, for example, 99 heads in 100 flips, and the null says the coin is fair, right? Then it's highly likely that you're going to reject the null. That's a strong result. When you reject the null, that's a strong result. That's like saying guilty. You are guilty. You're going up the river. You're guilty. Okay, that's a strong result or a statistically significant result, which means there is sufficient evidence to say something. If you reject the null, if you reject the null, there is sufficient evidence to say something. Whereas, if you do not reject the null, that's a weak result. That's flaky. That's like not guilty. Well, I don't know. You can be innocent or guilty, but we just don't have enough evidence yet. Seriously, we don't have enough evidence yet. There is insufficient evidence to say something. Statistically insignificant. That would be like if the null says the coin is fair and you get 51 heads in 100 flips. That's a weak result. There's some evidence against the idea of a fair coin, but not very much, right? A fair coin could easily come up 51 heads in 100 flips. Okay. Now, the rest of the sentence, the rest of the final conclusion for the layperson is written based on which hypothesis is the claim. If the null hypothesis was the claim, then it's like a jury trial. The null is on trial, and we're wondering if we can convict or reject it, right? So if the claim is David's claim, my coin is fair, So we put the coin on trial. We put George Washington or maybe David's mom on the coin on trial, okay? And we ask, can we convict this coin? Can we reject the idea that that coin is fair? The null is on trial. So we're weighing evidence against the claim that stating the claim. For example, the coin is fair. So there's either sufficient or insufficient evidence against the claim. We're weighing evidence. How do we weigh evidence? We're weighing evidence against the claim if the null is the claim, because we're putting the null on trial and we're weighing the evidence against the null claim. If there's enough evidence, bye-bye. All right. Now, if the alternative is the claim, then we can think of the alternative hypothesis as a research hypothesis. Can we publish something interesting? So, for example, does this drug work? That would normally correspond to the alternative hypothesis, right? For example, if you have a drug that lowers cholesterol or that lowers blood sugar or that raises some level of hormone, for example, right? So in a research hypothesis, you're usually weighing evidence for a tail, basically, for a tail. The null would say, there's no impact, or the two groups are similar, something like that. Okay, the null's kind of flaky, but the alternative is saying, hey, there's a result, our drug works. Our drug works. This procedure is effective, something like that. Or on the other hand, this medicine kills. It could go that way. So if the alternative is the claim, we think of it as a research hypothesis, and we wonder, can we prove it? Again, if the null is the claim, we ask, can we convict or reject it? If the alternative is the claim, we ask, can we prove it in the affirmative? So we're weighing evidence for the claim or in support of the claim that da-da-da. So for example, the alternative claim may be the coin is biased, or perhaps more interestingly, the drug works in the sense that cholesterol, bad cholesterol, is lowered, something like that, right? Can we prove that this drug works to lower cholesterol? Okay, we're going to weigh evidence for the claim that the drug works to reduce cholesterol, bad cholesterol. Okay, so we're going to get right to it, and we're going to use these pieces as we conduct hypothesis tests. Starting with lesson 34, we're going to start with hypothesis test for P, and we're going to test this hypothesis. Is the coin fair? That's next time.